Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk about the many ways that I dry, save, sort, and just preserve my seeds for the following year, or even for putting up on our store. And even though I've talked about these various methods in other videos, they've been more separated, so I wanted to consolidate it all together in this one so you can just see I do different things for different types of seed depending on what it is. So let's start with the tomato. Now, what I normally do is I actually slice my tomatoes and dry in thin slices so I can have the whole slice and the seeds and everything in there, and then I'll dry them on paper towels like this. But sometimes what I'll do is the same idea, but if I'm already cutting up a tomato to use it for something and a bunch of seed comes out of that tomato, then I will do the same thing with just the seed rather than the slice. And then I just lay it flat and let it dry on my rack. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. No, I don't run them in the dehydrator. I let them dry, air dry naturally. But then I'll just rip off however much. When I go to start them in the late winter, I just rip off a little bit, or if it's like with the black vernissage, when I use slices, they're just real small anyway. I might put a whole slice in a little 4-inch pot. And I go into more detail about that in how I grow my tomatoes, and I'll go ahead and link to the last video I did on that down below. But whether you use slices or this way, it's just one of the many ways you can save your tomato seeds. There's other ways to do it, and I do cover that in another video, maybe that one I'm going to link to. But this has been the way that works best for me, whether it be a whole slice or just doing it like this. And then the paper towel will just break down in the soil anyway, and I've always done really well when I save my seeds this way. Now, obviously, this is just for my own use. If I was going to save my tomato seeds for selling, which I haven't got to that point yet, not sure that I will, then I would do this a little differently than what I'm doing here, in order to make it easier to keep the seeds loose for packaging up, which is probably one of the reasons I might never sell my tomato seeds, because this just works really well for me and I don't want the hassle the other way. And then in a video that just came out where I talked about beans, I talked about the beans I grow, I talked about how I save them. I'll link to that video as well. But really with my beans, mostly it starts off with bringing them into the greenhouse and laying them over the slats that Patrick made for my tomatoes to tie my tomatoes up on. And I like to get the beans out of the heavy rain so they can dry better and quicker somewhere else. But if you live in a dry enough climate, most times when it comes to beans and peas, you can leave them on the plant until the pod fully dries. But also watch out for birds. One thing I found this year by leaving a lot of my peas out there is the birds started getting into the peas and breaking open the shell and then eating the peas right out of the shell. It was the first time I've ever seen that happen. But with the peas, that's something else. I also, when I bring them in a little at a time, once the pods get mature enough, I'll also put them on my drying rack, and that sits next to my wood stove. Now let me talk a little bit more before I continue about that drying rack. I have a video just on that. It's actually used for many different things. It is a multi-purpose rack that originally Patrick built to be for dehydrating, but it works for many other things. So I'll link to that down below. But when I'm drying the seeds or allowing them to dry, that rack sits next to the wood stove. And then I have the stainless steel racks, and all my little trays or loose pods, however it is I'm drying it, will sit on those little shelves, those little stainless steel racks. And then I'll let things fully dry there before I put them up. Now, some things I will put immediately into these cloth bags. Like in this one here, I have my gopher spurge that will then break these open and get the seeds out. But what I do with those, and with the nasturtiums, which are in these two bags, I've got my dark red nasturtium and then the mixed nasturtium here. Those I'll just put directly in these bags, and these hang from hooks right above the wood stove, not right above the wood stove, but along the mantle there. I try not to hang anything directly above the wood stove so it doesn't get too hot, but more along the sides, and then let them dry in there. Once I've got my bag full with the amount of seeds I want in there and they're all dry, then I'll put them away in my back room. But I also use these bags. These are all little bags that I've made for just storing seeds as well. So again, I leave these in here and then they just get put away. I'll store the seeds I'm going to plant for next year for the beans in these bags, and then other beans that I'm either going to eat or put up on my store, I store in jars and vacuum seal. And then the peas, I don't collect as many of the peas as I do the beans, so they all just go in this bag. You know, the ones I'm going to sell and the ones I'm going to plant next year. Now, squash is one of those things that you would want to do it just like any other wet type seed. Once you dig it out of the squash, I recommend laying it on any kind of paper. It can be paper towel, it can be a piece of brown paper bag, and then let them dry on there somewhere where they're out of the way, but they can get fully dry, and then you can package them away however you want. I do like using the cloth bags for several reasons, because that way if the seeds aren't fully dry when I put them in there, they're getting enough airflow. I don't have to worry about that. And it's, you know, it's just a good way to keep them sorted, and it's more natural, and you're not having to use plastic. Now when it comes to something like peppers like these, I'll just take a handful of peppers and I just let them fully dry. Again, I'll set them on the racks, and whatever I'm not going to cut up and use preserve for future use of the year, whatever I want to use for seed, I just let them dry right there in the pods. You can do the same thing with like your smaller items, like the lemon cucumber. I've done that with. That's how it happens in nature. But obviously you can't do that with everything, because you don't want all your stuff like your zucchini or your spaghetti squash. It's better to scoop the seeds out and let them dry outside of the fruit like that, in whatever form. Now when it comes to herb seeds, a lot of them, especially smaller ones like my yarrow, I will pick the whole flower head. I have, I think, 3 of these little food trays. I love these little food paper trays for using to dry seed in. And because the yarrow is so tiny, I like doing the yarrow this way because it's easier just to leave it on there. And just because of the way it is. Now when it comes to Feverfew, marshmallow, these are all small seeds. I actually use pillowcases like I did here. This was my horehound. I didn't get a lot of horehound this year, so maybe even by the time you see this video I'll be sold out of horehound seed because my plants are still young. But anyway, I'll just cut the whole pieces or stalks of the plants, whatever it is, valerian and so on, and put them in pillowcases like this and hang them up. And when it's nice enough, especially when I first harvest them, if it's nice enough, I'll hang them out on the line and let them dry out there. But this year it got cold and wet too soon for me to do much of that. And so most of them have been drying in the house on my clotheslines inside. But now that we're getting to where we're going to start building, we're starting to build fires, and I need my indoor clotheslines for hanging clothes, I'm little at a time moving the bags and hanging them up in my back pantry. I have those bungee cords along there anyway that help kind of hold all my jars and stuff in place, and so I just hang them right on there with those stainless steel clothespins. And so that works really good. And the reason why pillowcases, especially when you're talking small seeds, is not, again, coming back to the natural fabric. It's cotton, so it's going to breathe well, so it's going to dry better, and thus you're going to be less likely to get mold. And as the seeds start falling off the plant, like with the borage, the seeds just kind of shower off there, and same thing with the amaranth, then they'll collect at the bottom of the bag and you don't have to worry about losing them all over the ground. So that works really good for a lot of my seeds. And then of course anything in pods, they're going to stay in there until you shell them for the most part. My peas I always bring in the pods individually because of the time of the year that they mature is different than the beans. The beans, I'll bring them in from the greenhouse once they're dry enough and just shell them inside. And sometimes if some of them I can't get them hung up there, or I'm bringing them a few in a little early, like you can see in this picture right here, I have a few beans there, then I will go ahead and lay them on those stainless steel racks and let them finish drying there before I shell them. You want to make sure when it comes to beans and peas that they're fully dry before you open them up to get the seed out, because if you shell them too soon, while the pod on the outside is still very fleshy and damp, then the seeds that you take out of there, they just don't quite mature right and they can shrivel up. So it's best to keep them in the pods until the pods are fully dry. Though I don't do a lot of seed drying in these, what I use these mostly for, and these aren't going to be best for everyone. For a lot of people, you may want to use something that's got a lid on it of some sort, but it's how I keep my seeds that I'm selling on my store sorted out. And then I like these because I can stack them, and these are all dry, these are ready to go, and then when I need to make more seed packs, I just pull out the appropriate one and then start making my packs. And I actually have a couple of stacks of just these, of seeds, just in things like this, that is underneath those racks I showed you. I'll probably be putting this picture in here quite a few times, so I don't know if you can see them, but they're right at the bottom underneath all the racks. And then when I go to make my seed packs, I pull those out. And then another thing I started implementing just recently was, because we order those batteries, and I found that through my business account, I can actually get a better deal ordering the batteries for our colloidal silver generators in this size box. Well, it makes a perfect size for putting seeds, where it's less likely going to tip over than something like this, and it's going to hold more. So since I've got a lot of calendula seed this year, most of the calendula seed we've been selling in our store is actually from my father-in-law's down in California. But now this year I finally got enough flowers again that I was not only able to get a bunch dehydrated up for my own use, but I was able to get enough seed that I can put these up on the store too. So putting them in this, since some of them I have to bring in because they've been heavily rained on, even if they're ready, fully mature, they're all wet from the rain, then I can put them in the cardboard like this and let them air dry, maybe stir them around a little bit, again on those racks. And these are actually in here are all pretty dry right now. I'll probably leave them for a few more days before I mix them in with the other seed that I'm selling. But anyway, that's something else. Anything that you can allow your seeds to get plenty of air and breathe well. So try to stay away from plastic. That's just going to rot your seeds. That's what's important, is making sure they dry really well. You don't want to pack them away in plastic, and at least until you know they're fully dry. But even then, I still prefer to store them in bags like this, or anything that's going to allow more airflow. Anything as paper or cardboard or cloth is best for that. Oh, and I do the same thing with the sunflowers, except with those, I actually cut the whole sunflower head. Once it starts to droop, all the petals have fallen off, then I'll cut those, the whole flower head. I have to do it before the blue jays get to them, or they're not blue jays, they're stellar jays is what they are. I have to bring them in before they find them, because they'll eat every seed off of there. But I'll do the same thing using the pillowcases and then hang them up. Those take longer because I'm leaving them on the flower head to let them fully mature off the plant. So it's best in a lot of those cases, like with the sunflowers, the beans, and the peas, I leave them on the flower as long as possible. And once everything is fully dry, then you can just take those seeds right off of there. But since they're in the pillowcase, if they start falling off the flower, the pillowcase is going to catch them. So that's what makes that really ideal. And then I also have a video series that I started a few years ago. I'm going to be adding more to, on the best ways to sort out your seeds, because each one is going to be different. And it's also going to depend on whether or not you're wanting to sell your seeds or not. If you're just saving your seeds for yourself, like for example, this yarrow right here, I can just take one of these little tiny flowers, which you can hardly see, and just plant that as is, or just gently pull out the seeds. There's a whole bunch of seeds right there, and that's all I need to do. I don't have to go through taking all those seeds out. But I did find a much easier way this last year to get the seeds out of the flowers instead of pulling them out individually, and that's in that series. So I did that a few months ago, I think it was. You'll be surprised at what you can do with your seeds with different types of mesh. Like this is very fine. This is great for the yarrow and some other really tiny seeds like this, where I can just run it through this like a sieve. The seeds will fall out and most of the chaff will stay inside this strainer. This one, this colander, it's got seed stuff in it because I was just using it for sorting out some chicory. This has a little bit bigger hole, so if you have seeds that are still too lightweight, like the yarrow is too lightweight to be able to blow the chaff off like I'll do with certain other seeds, but they're too big to fit through this, then you can use a stainless steel mesh colander like this. This is perfect for my chicory seeds to fall through. Now all the little tiny bits will fall through as well, but the bigger pieces of chaff will stay in there, and then those tiny little pieces are more like dust, and those are easier to just blow off. So that's one way you can get, if you're wanting to get all the chaff out of there. And again, if you're only saving them for your personal use, you don't have to worry about that chaff. If you're saving them to sell them, it's best to try to get as much of the chaff out, and it's not always easy. But that way, when people get a seed that they've never seen before, they need to know what that seed looks like. They're not going to know the difference between some of the chaff and the seed itself. That can be very difficult to tell if you're totally new to seeds, especially herb seeds in particular. So a couple other examples I have here are anise hyssop. So anise hyssop and lamb's ear, especially, these are ones that I dry in the bags. Lamb's ear is one of the easiest because it just falls, just like the borage, falls to the bottom of the bag, and all I got to do is scoop them out, blow off the chaff, and that's why these little trays are good for that too, because you just shake it like this and blow across it outside or into your fireplace and just let that chaff blow right off as you're shaking it, and you'll be able to get most of it off. Not all of it, but most of it. And that's for a lot of the seeds, that's going to work quite well. It works with the anise hyssop, it works with the lamb's ear, it works with the amaranth. Any seeds that's heavy enough that it's going to stay to the bottom. Lighter weight seeds like the yarrow, the feverfew, and so on don't work that easily. But feverfew is easy because you can just pinch the dry flower heads and the seeds will just, they'll just fly out of there, and those are easy. So each seed's going to be different, and every time I start saving a new seed, I got to learn a new way. Like with the chicory, I had to figure out something entirely different and how to do that. And valerian, I haven't figured out the best way to do that one yet, other than sort through it by hand, and it's a very long process because the chaff and the seeds are all the same size. They won't go through this, they all go through the same sieve, and the seeds are too light that if I blow across it, I can't blow the chaff out, so I have to sort it by hand. Real pain, but sometimes I'm hoping eventually I'll figure out a better way, and I just keep experimenting, and you can do that too. Just figure out what works best and you'll figure it out. Just make sure that when you start doing where you're blowing the chaff off, first blow it into something where you can see it well and see if you're blowing out a bunch of seed with the chaff. That's what I always do first. And if that's happening, then I won't use that method. But if all I'm seeing is chaff, or maybe mostly chaff with a couple of seeds, then I know that's going to be a good viable method for me to use for sorting out and saving the seeds. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas and some tips. And don't forget to check out the videos I'll be linking in the description box down below for more information on seed saving, and hopefully that will help get you ready for this next year, for 2022. Oh, and also don't forget to put some of your ideas down below, your favorite ways of saving seeds from various different types of plants. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.